It might be high time for them to change their name from Politifact
to Politifaked.
Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and I initially set out today to do a vlog on that decision coming out of Pennsylvania in the county of Butler versus Thomas W. Wolfe, but in doing the research for that vlog, I came across an article that
I knew what I had to do today.
Now, technically, it might not be an article. It is a fact check from Politifact on the Jacob Blake shooting, and in reading it, it just illustrates everything that is wrong with fact checkers. If this is how the fact checkers act, who is going to fact check the fact checkers? And to quote the ever so wise Homer Simpson,
"If you're the police, who will police the police?"
I don't know. Coast Guard?
Now, this vlog is not going to be a legal analysis of the situation. I don't think I have anything to add to the discussion. If you want to see the most thorough breakdown legal analysis of the incident, go watch Nate Brody's dissection and explanation of it. It is truly fantastic.
So the NBA and Major League Baseball have had to postpone games because of the case of Jacob Blake. So in this video, we're going to look at the facts of the shooting of Jacob Blake.
I am only going to do an analysis dissection of the Politifact fact-checking because it is so bad it basically discredits fact-checkers. It discredits them entirely. Now, the statement that Politifact is fact-checking is the following. Facebook posts, stated on August 26, 2020 in a Facebook post, says Jacob Blake, quote, declared he had a gun in the car and was going to get it, end quote, and was, quote, brandishing, end quote, a knife. No, Jacob Blake did not, quote, brandish a knife, get a gun before police shooting in Kenosha. Politifact, truthometer, false. If your time is short, there was no gun involved. State investigators said there was none found at the scene. Police did find a knife in the SUV, but authorities haven't said if it was there throughout the confrontation or if Blake held it at some point. Grainy video shows an object in Blake's hand, but he didn't, quote, brandish, end quote, it, and it's not clear if it's a knife, sunglasses, or something else. Now, the first problematic thing I noticed when I actually went to Facebook to read the original post was a warning that popped up before I could even see the original post. False information checked by independent fact checkers. See why, see photo. Now, we are going to go see why, but first let's go see the photo. Facts matter, exclamation point, exclamation point. Police were called because Jacob Blake was waving a knife around in a gas station. While en route, dispatch informed police that Blake had an outstanding warrant in regard to his recent sexual assault and domestic abuse charges. Police deployed the taser and it failed. Jacob Blake declared he had a gun in the car and was going to go get it. He continued to brandish the knife while disregarding officer commands. When he reached into the car, officers fired. This is why they are burning down Kenosha, Wisconsin right now. Now, I don't go to Facebook for news, and I take any news that I find on Facebook with a big grain of salt, and whether or not Facebook should be in the fact-checking business in the first place is a separate discussion. Right now, I'm going to only analyze how Politifact purports to have fact-checked this statement. We first have to start with the phraseology of the statement they are purporting to fact-check. The Facebook post says Jacob Blake, quote, declared he had a gun in the car and was going to get it, and was, quote, brandishing, end quote, a knife. The first thing to note is how Politifact phrased this statement as a cumulative and not an alternative statement. By phrasing it as an and not as an or by breaking it down into two separate statements, all elements of this statement need to be true in order for the entire statement to be true, and therefore if one aspect of this entire statement is false, the entire statement can be written off as false. And for those of you who've been around my channel for long enough, you know that I always say, in depositions, keep your questions short and concise for this very reason. The longer the question, the more convoluted the question, the more the witness can deny the question or not answer the question if one element of the question is sort of confusing to the person. In depositions, you want to keep your questions short and concise for this very reason, but in fact-checking, you want to keep the question convoluted and complicated for this very reason. And notice the subjective terminology in the statement to be fact-checked. Brandishing in quotes means that it's sort of a subjective analysis of a term so that the person could in fact be holding a knife, but if the person is not brandishing a knife, the statement can be qualified as false. The fact to be fact-checked as drafted is drafted deliberately in such a way so as to be declared false, and even still, the declaration of falseness of this statement is itself a stretch. And I am not saying this based on my own opinion or assessment. I am basing this on the opinion and assessment as drafted by Politifact itself, and I just realized I have to go get my kid. Oh my goodness. And besides, those kids behind me are making too much noise. We will finish this vlog in a bit. Alright, I'm back, and before we get into the actual text of the fact check, another thing to note is how they have limited their fact check to two specific and specifically drafted elements. There was actually a lot more in that Facebook post that Politifact is purporting to fact check, but Politifact is limiting their fact check to two specific cumulative facts and two specifically worded cumulative facts. As we wait for a full Wisconsin Department of Justice report on the Jacob Blake shooting, speculation has run rampant online about whether the 29-year-old Kenoshan man was armed and with what, in the moments before a Kenosha police officer shot him 7 times in the back. The lack of detailed information from law enforcement has only added to the speculation. Now, my first observation is that it is a curious admission to state that there is in fact a lack of detailed information in a fact check that you declare wholeheartedly false. That includes a widely shared August 26, 2020 Facebook post that starts out blaring, quote, "Facts matter, exclamation point, end quote, before asserting this. It was accompanied by a screen grab from an onlooker's video of Blake where an object in his hand is circled. This post was flagged as part of Facebook's efforts to combat false news and misinformation on its newsfeed. Read more about our partnership with Facebook." And I would indeed like to read more about Politifact's partnership with Facebook as to how it's going to combat false news and misinformation on its newsfeed. I would very much like to read more on this, so let's do that. How is Facebook addressing false news through third-party fact checkers? We're committed to fighting the spread of false news on Facebook. We use both technology and human review to remove fake accounts, promote news literacy, and disrupt the financial incentives of spammers. In certain countries, we also work with third-party fact checkers who are certified through nonpartisan international fact-checking network to help identify and review false news. How Facebook addresses false news. Identifying false news. We identify news that may be false using signs like feedback from people on Facebook. Fact checkers may also identify stories to review on their own. Reviewing stories. Fact checkers will review stories, check their facts, and rate their accuracy. Showing false stories lower in news feeds. If a fact checker rates a story as false, it will appear lower in the news feeds. This significantly reduces the number of people who see it. Agree or disagree with the qualification of any given news story as fake news? There's a word for this type of behavior.
Censorship, manipulation, chicanery.
Taking action against repeat offenders. Pages and websites that repeatedly share false news will see their distribution reduced and their ability to advertise removed. Providing more information if you see false news. Providing more context on false news. When fact checkers write articles with more information about a story, you'll see them in related articles immediately below the story in your newsfeed. Notifying people when they've shared false news. You'll receive a notification if you try to share a story or have shared one in the past that's been rated false by fact checkers. Page admins will also be notified if they share stories rated false. There is also a word for this. Bullshit. Giving you more tools to identify and give feedback on false news. Learn how to spot false news. Knowing what to look out for can help you make informed decisions about what to read, trust, and share. Provide feedback on stories you think are false. Let us know if you think a story is false. This is one of the signs we use when trying to identify false news. And now, with all that said and done, let's go see exactly what Politifact does in order to determine if a story is false for the purposes of qualifying it as false news. That was the worst quotes I've ever done. Here's what we know. There was no gun. The Facebook post avoids directly claiming a gun, instead attributing statements to Blake about having and getting a gun. We don't know what was said, and we may never know since the responding officers weren't wearing body cameras. The Kenosha Police Department doesn't use them. Audio in the cell phone video shot by a witness is hard to discern due to bystanders' shouts. So there's no way to prove this part of the claim directly, though no witnesses have emerged since the incident that offer this account. The man who made the Facebook claim did not respond to a request for the evidence behind the claim, but we know there was no gun. On August 26, 2020, news release from the Department of Justice said officers found a knife on the driver's floorboard, but, quote, a search of the vehicle located no additional weapons, end quote. Politifact's own fact check specifies that the statement being fact checked was not whether or not he did in fact have a gun, rather only whether or not he said he did have a gun. Politifact's own fact check then goes on to admit that we don't know what was said, then goes on to conclude that the statement was false. In other words, the fact checker goes from an unknown to a known. An unknown statement, we don't know what was said, to a known, it is false. In my humble opinion, that is not quality fact checking. They could have come to the conclusion that the statement was unsubstantiated as opposed to outright false. But the fact checking gets even worse. Knife involvement is still
ambiguous.
The role of the knife is much less clear. The DOJ has not clarified whether the knife was on the floorboard throughout the confrontation or if Blake may have held it at some point. Spokeswoman Jillian Drummond declined to answer that question when asked by Politifact Wisconsin on August 27, 2020. Video taken by onlookers shows something in Blake's hand, but the resolution is low, so it could be a knife, sunglasses, or something else.
So it could be a knife.
The man who said he made the widely shared cell phone video of the shooting, 22-year-old Rayshawn White, told the Associated Press he heard officers yell, quote, drop the knife, end quote, as they scuffled with Blake before the shooting. White said he didn't see a knife in Blake's hands. The audio captured by White is inconclusive, though there is a phrase or two that could be interpreted as, quote, drop the knife. The individual who made the cell phone recording heard the police officers shout, drop the knife, drop the knife. If you listen to the audio recording, you could hear words that could be construed as being drop the knife. This is like one of those moments in law where a party's own conclusions are contradicted by their own allegations. And it gets even worse. Blake's representatives have said he was unarmed. His father told the Chicago Sun-Times for an August 25, 2020 story, quote, my son didn't have a weapon, he didn't have a gun, end quote. And by Politifact's own admissions and allegations, we know that statement is at least partially false because a weapon was in fact found in the car as per Politifact's own assessment. But listen to this part. Blake's attorney, Ben Crump, said in a statement released August 27, 2020, quote, Jacob did nothing to provoke police. Witnesses confirmed that he was not in possession of a knife and didn't threaten officers in any way, end quote. But another attorney representing the Blake family, Patrick Salvi Jr., had told CNN the day before that Blake didn't have a weapon in the vehicle, which turned out to not be true. So in their own fact-checking analysis, they are now taking statements made by the attorney for the Blake's family that actually turned out to be false in that there was, in fact, a weapon in the car. All of this in the fact-checking analysis of the statement that Politifact has qualified as being unequivocally false. But the next part is just the epitome of biased fact-checking. What we do know is that referring to Blake as, quote, brandishing, end quote, appears to be an exaggeration. Video of the shooting shows Blake walking around the front of the car with his back to the officers and his left arm swinging at his side, grasping some object. Brandishing is defined by Merriam-Webster as, quote, to shake or wave something such as a weapon menacingly, end quote.
That's not what the video shows.
That statement is itself not a fact. That statement is an opinion. Politifact is supposed to be checking facts, not issuing its own interpretation of what it sees. Our ruling. Because Politifact is no longer a mere fact checker. They are a judge, jury, and executioner all rolled into one by their own self-proclamation. A viral Facebook post says Blake, quote, declared he had a gun in the car and was going to get it, end quote, and was, quote, brandishing, end quote, a knife. We have no way of knowing for sure what Blake said, but we know there was no gun. And we don't yet know if the knife police later found in the SUV was there throughout the confrontation or held by Blake at some point. But Blake was not, quote, brandishing, end quote, anything in the video taken by bystanders. For our fact checkers, the burden of proof is on the speaker. Due to the lack of evidence substantiating these claims at this point, we rate this claim false with a capital F. Politifact has no way of knowing for sure what Blake said. They know that they found a knife in the car. They know that Blake was holding something in his hand during the confrontation, but they don't know if it was a knife. It could have been sunglasses or something else. But in any event, whatever Blake had in his hand, even if it was in fact a knife, he wasn't brandishing it according to the opinions of Politifact. And because the speaker hasn't satisfied Politifact's burden of the proof, they therefore go on to declare this statement unequivocally false. Setting aside everything else, regardless of how you feel about the incident or the police in general, based only on Politifact's own assessment, how would you rate their conclusion based on their own evidence? Based on their own facts and their own admissions in their own analysis, I don't qualify this as fact-checking. I qualify this as pure spin. And with that said, if you like my videos and you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm. If you want to support the channel, all of the support links are in the pinned comment. We've got PayPal, Subscribestar, Patreon, YouTube, membership, merch. We've got merch, politics, ruins, everything, but more important than all of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah.